Hello, I'm Gill at engVid, and today's lesson is all about the British royal family. Okay, so if you probably see items in the news about our royal family, you'll have seen the Queen Elizabeth, maybe her husband, Prince Philip, but they're a big family, and also not all countries have a royal family. So I've just put this lesson together with a bit of information to tell you a little bit more about them. Okay, right, so the British royal family are also known as the House of Windsor, because Windsor is their name, which comes from Windsor, this place here. Windsor Castle is one of their homes. So years ago they decided to use the name Windsor. So some people like the royal family, admire them. They think of them as kind of celebrities, just like film stars and sports celebrities. They're reported in the newspapers in a similar way. You get gossip about them. In some newspapers who like to write a lot of gossip, if they've heard something, it may not be accurate, but they've heard a story about some member of the royal family, and they print the story. They might have a photograph to go with it. So they're always in the news, the royal family, for one reason or another, either a good reason or a bad reason. Pretty much every day you can hear something about the royal family or read something in the newspaper. So some people do like them, and even, think of them as celebrities, and maybe give too much time and thought to them. But then at the other extreme, some people dislike them because they're thinking of the fact that they spend a lot of money. They have all these buildings which are expensive to look after. People say, what work do? They don't seem to do any work. So why should they live such rich lives if they don't do anything? But of course, a lot of the royal family do things all the time. They're not working for money always. Sometimes they do that as well. They have jobs, some of them, with a salary. But some of them, they may not be working and being paid for it, but they're doing kind of diplomatic work. They're meeting visitors from other countries. They're being a kind of ambassadors, that sort of thing. So they keep busy, and they're patrons of charities, and they go to events, and they give their support to things and so on. So a lot of the royal family do keep quite busy trying to live useful lives. So I think if they didn't do that, there would be a lot more sort of criticism of them. But because you can see that they're doing things, working hard, that stops a lot of people from criticising and saying we shouldn't have a royal family. Some people are called Republicans, and they say we should have a president instead of a queen or a king. We should have a president and a prime minister instead of a queen and a prime minister. So there are Republicans around, and have been for more than 100 years, people who wanted to get rid of the royal family, but it hasn't happened yet. Okay, so the kind of system we have in the UK, it's called a constitutional monarchy, The monarchy part is to do with the royal family, with the Queen, the monarch. So the word monarch means king or queen. The constitutional part is to do with politics and the government and parliament. So what happens really is the government, the MPs, the ministers in parliament, they make the decisions. The government makes the decisions. And if they have a new piece of an act of parliament, a new law, for example, the Queen just has to sign it. If it's been democratically decided already by the politicians that this will become law, the Queen can't just say, no, I don't like that, I'm not going to sign it. She just has to sign it because it's gone through a democratic process. So that's why it's a constitutional monarchy. It's the monarch or king or queen governed by the parliament, by the politicians. Okay. So let's have a look at some of the vocabulary, which is fairly simple, most of it. So a king or queen is the monarch, the head of state, if you like. Usually any children they have will be prince or princess. So prince for male, princess for female. There are some other titles used as well, which are sort of high aristocratic titles. Duke for the male, duchess for the female. So some of the royal family have these titles as well as prince. Someone might be prince and duke. They just have extra titles because of their position. Okay, so the current Queen, I'm sure you've seen her in pictures and on television, in films, is Queen Elizabeth II. We always use these Roman numerals for the king or queen, so not second to ND like that, but we use the Roman numerals. It's just a convention, a tradition. And she was born in 1926. Okay. And she married Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. That's the title he was given when he married her. So he was already called Philip. That was his name. But then because he married, she was at the time Princess Elizabeth. She wasn't already Queen at that time. She was Princess Elizabeth. So he became Prince Philip, and he was given this title in addition, the Duke of Edinburgh. So Edinburgh has a connection with Scotland because the UK is a combination of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. So some titles mention Scotland or Wales, usually. Okay. So she married Prince Philip 1947, a few years before she became Queen. Her father died in 1952, so she automatically became Queen because he had two daughters and she was the older daughter. So there were no sons. So she became Queen as soon as he died, 1952. And then the coronation, the special ceremony, when the crown is put on the person's head, was the following year, because coronations are very complicated events. They take a long time to organise, so they couldn't have a coronation the same year. It's often the following year. And that was also interesting because it was the first time a coronation in this country had been on television. It was televised. There were TV cameras there on the day and it was being broadcast live. And that gave a big boost to the ownership of television sets because the television technology had just started being developed around this period, and a lot of people hadn't bought a television yet. But when they knew that the coronation was going to be on television, they either bought their own television to watch it, or they arranged to go to a neighbour's house or a friend's house to watch it on their television. So 1953, the sales of televisions went up dramatically because of the coronation. Okay, so and there is still film available that you can see now in black and white of the coronation. Right, okay, so she became queen and was crowned. And then just to mention the main buildings that belong, or well, do they belong to the royal family, or they belong to the nation, but the royal family live in them. Buckingham Palace in London, okay. Windsor Castle in Berkshire, which is to the west of London. That's a very old building, older than this one. There's a house, a big house in Sandringham, which is in Norfolk, which is sort of north-east from London, about 100 miles or so. And then again, a Scottish connection. There's at Balmoral, a castle in Scotland. And usually the royal family go to the different buildings at particular times of year. So in the summer, for example, in August, traditionally the royal family go up to Scotland in August and through into September. So there's a very long tradition of being in certain places at certain times. Okay, and then just to show you a little bit of the history going back, the royal family and the person who is queen, as I mentioned, she was the elder of two daughters, so she inherited the throne, as it's called, inherit the throne. The throne is the big chair that the queen sits on. So she inherited the throne. Inherited from her father. So it is hereditary. So that's the other word, hereditary. So it is a family, and people inherit. The next generation inherit the throne, so it's a continuous line, and it's designed really to avoid confusion. If one king or queen dies, there may be people fighting to take their place, people competing in competition for becoming king or queen. So they don't want that to happen. So because there have been times in history when that has happened, and it's caused a lot of people killed in battles and so on. So this is just to show how the family has gone back through time. So the Queen's father, who died in 1952, was King George VI. So that's sixth there. So he was king from 1936 until 1952. This person here was actually his older brother, but he wasn't king for very long. King Edward VIII, he was only king in 1 year, 1936, because he decided not to be king. He abdicated. That's the sort of royal word for resigning. He resigned. Or he quit. He said, I quit. Well, he didn't say I quit. He said it in a different way. But it's a very long story why he decided he didn't want to be king. I don't have time for that in this lesson, but there's lots of information on the internet about it. Okay, so he was automatically king in 1936 because his father, King George V, died, and because Edward was the eldest son, he automatically became king. But then he abdicated and his next brother became king instead. That was a bit unexpected, but that's what happened. So George V then, he was King George V from 1910 to 1936. His father was King Edward VII, who was king from 1901 to 1910. He didn't have a very long reign because he was already quite old by the time he became king, because his mother, Queen Victoria, she was queen for a very long time, from 1837 through to 1901. So by the time she died, he was already quite old, it's a bit similar to the present queen and her son. Very similar, really. Okay, so, and then you may be wondering, we have Queen Elizabeth II. Was there a Queen Elizabeth I? And there was, but it was quite a long time ago, in the 16th century and early 17th century. That was Elizabeth I, and she was the daughter of King Henry VIII, who you may know had 6 wives, not all at the same time, one at a time. He had 6 wives, so he's the king who is famous for marrying 6 times. Okay, right, so that's the first half of the lesson, and I have just a bit more information for you in the second part. Okay, so let's have a look in a bit more detail at the inheritance of the British throne. So the word inheritance, the person who inherits the throne, usually from their mother or father, who was king or queen before. So inheritance of the throne, hereditary. And we talk about the person who is next in line to the throne. You can say who is next in line to the throne, who inherits the throne when the present monarch dies. Okay, so usually, as I've said, there are lots of people, and they all have a position. I've put some numbers here to show what number they are in line to the throne. So you can see that the first person in line to the throne is Prince Charles, Prince of Wales, who is the son, the eldest son of Queen Elizabeth. So he's first in line. And then there's a rule of who inherits or who's next after him, and so on. But there are lots of them, so there's no difficulty if one person unexpectedly dies. There's always someone else, someone next down on the list. But back in the 18th century, there was a time when there was a bit of difficulty finding who to take the throne after one monarch had died. There was also a problem about different religions, Protestant and Catholic religions, and I think that the king who was possibly the next in line for the throne was Catholic or had Catholic interests, and people didn't want that. They wanted to stay with the Protestant side of Christianity. So what did they do? They had to find a more distant relative who happened to be Protestant, and that distant relative was German and lived in Germany and spoke German. and didn't speak English. So, but he was the best option, because the most important thing at the time was to have a king or queen, preferably king, who was Protestant. And this guy, George, agreed to come and become king. So he came from Germany to become King George I, and he couldn't speak English. I don't know if he learned a bit of English, but I don't think he tried very hard, because they didn't have things like the internet and engVid in those days. So it must have been quite difficult to learn English. So he became king. That was when the order of what's called the succession is another word. Succession, meaning one person follows another person. It was not very, there weren't enough people to fill the vacancy, if you like, the job vacancy. So it's not like that nowadays, because the present queen has had 4 children. Her eldest son has had 2 children, and his eldest son has had 2 children. So there are lots and lots of people, others as well. The other 3 children of the Queen have had children. So all of them are at some position in line to the throne. So just to go through the names here, Prince Charles is also called Prince of Wales. That's to make a connection with Wales as one of the UK countries, because UK is United Kingdom, so it's 4 different countries united. Okay, so Prince Charles, traditionally, going back many hundreds of years, the eldest son of the king or queen is called the Prince of Wales. And you know from that title that that person is heir to the throne. So he's the heir to the throne. So that's why first in line here. And he was born in 1948. Okay. Then her next child was a girl, Princess Anne, who also has the title Princess Royal, born in 1950. She is actually 12th in line. You might think, well, why isn't she a bit further up? But there was the law at the time was that the sons had more a higher position than daughters, and that law has changed more recently. I'll tell you a bit more about that towards the end of the lesson. So that's why she is only 12th in line to the throne, whereas her next younger brother Andrew is 6th in line. So there was some sort of lack of equality between sons and daughters in the past, which there isn't anymore. But because it was the law at the time they were born, it's not being applied retrospectively. They have to stay with that position now. Okay, so Princess Anne. Next one, Prince Andrew, born 1960. And he has this extra title, another Duke, Duke of York. And York is a city up in the north of England. Okay. And then finally, the 4th son was Prince Edward. And he also has a title. Earl is another aristocratic title, a bit like Duke. He's the Earl of Wessex. And Wessex is an area in the west of England, okay, which covers more than one county. It's like Devon and Cornwall and so on. So Earl of Wessex, born 1964, and he is 9th in line to the throne. Okay, so with Prince Charles having children, they then are in line for the throne ahead of Charles's other brothers and sisters. So Prince Charles, his eldest son is Prince William. His title is the Duke of Cambridge, so another duke. Cambridge is a city just north of London, a university city. He was born in 1982, and he's second in line for the throne, okay? And his younger brother is Prince Harry, whose title is also Prince Henry of Wales, so Wales comes into it again. Harry and Henry, that's the same name really. People called Henry. The informal name for Henry is Harry, and everybody thinks of him as Prince Harry, not Henry. Okay, he was born in 1984, and he is fifth in line to the throne. Okay, so then Prince William, who is already the grandson of the present Queen, has had two children. Prince George of Cambridge, so he has the Cambridge title because his father has the Cambridge title. Prince George of Cambridge was born 2013, so he's a little boy, but he's third in line for the throne. Okay, and then they had a daughter, Princess Charlotte of Cambridge. Again, she was born in 2015. And because of the change in the law, this new law of equality was in 2013. So by the time Princess Charlotte was born in 2015, 2 years later, that then means that she becomes fourth in line to the throne after her older brother under the new law. So she is the first person, a little girl, to be affected by this new law, which as a very small baby, she became fourth in line to the throne. Okay. So, and then of course you probably remember Prince Charles was married to Diana, who died in 1997 in a car crash in Paris, which was a big shock. And Prince William is married to Catherine, and she is called the Duchess of Cambridge to match his title. Okay, so I hope that's given you a bit of an idea about the more detailed picture of the British royal family and who they all are. There are lots of other relatives too, but there isn't time to go into them. These are the main ones who you might see in newspapers and magazines or on television and so on. So I hope that's been a bit of interesting history and present day, what's called current affairs. So if you'd like to go to the website engvid.com, there's a quiz there to test your knowledge on this lesson, and I hope to see you again soon. Okay, bye for now.